Morning. Today we're going to talk about careers and work. Now, clearly outside of the family, the most important thing in a person's life is going to be their occupation. Now, there's clearly a difference between a career and work. Work is what you do to get paid. Work is viewed as temporary. Work is a job. Careers, hopefully, are things that are much more long-term planned. They are path, perhaps. You may have multiple specific jobs within a single career, okay? So anyway, what can we say? One area of psychology, an application of psychology, is an industrial organizational psychology, and it's a study of human behavior in the workplace. Um, you know, in theory, I'll just give you the answer. This is the answer that you would find for a test. Okay, the primary goal is to increase the dignity and performance of workers and the organizations where they labor. I mean, if you're taking a test, that's the right answer. But the fact is that's not true. The fact is the primary goal of an IO psychologist is to make company money, period. That's it. That is the only reason they exist. Every single piece of the element, they don't give a shit whether a worker is happy or not happy if it makes money. If a happy worker makes more money, then we care about a happy worker, but not because we care about them being happy, but because we care that a happy worker makes more money. See, they don't give a crap about workers. I don't care what they say. So I'm a little bitter about the whole field of IO psychology. But I'll let that go. Different things they might look at is worker performance, motivation, job satisfaction, selecting the right people. In fact, the very first IO psychologist was wow. Now my brain is messed up. The German guy, I can't remember. He moved to America. He took William James's position. I can't remember. But anyway, the very first IO psychologist, he said, and I respect this very greatly, there's no such thing as a bad job. There's simply bad placement of people into jobs, okay? And that I can really dig that no matter what the job is, a job in and of itself is not inherently a bad job because it may well fit somebody's skill sets and interests and everything quite clearly. So, in the world of industrial organizational psychology and jobs, a job analysis is a procedure which is done by an IO psychologist in which they look at people that are in a particular job and they break it apart. They look at what tasks are done, what equals successful performance, etc., etc. A job analysis is critical because what you're essentially doing is operationally defining what the job is, and therefore later on when you need to do a job evaluation for raises or something like this, well, you need to know what the job is if you're going to figure out whether or not somebody's doing a good one. Later on, when you want to hire somebody and you need to write a job description, to go to hire somebody, and then later on when you want to write a contract, with an employer, and you can talk about, its job specifications. And so this notion of a job analysis, or in some incredibly complex way, defining what the job is the first step in all IO psychology. So there you go. There's the okay. And so it turns out that, well, I'm going to get to that in a bit. Okay. In fact, look at this down at the bottom. Job specifications. Delineate. Delineates the KSAOs. KSAOs, knowledge, skills, aptitudes, and others? I don't know. I don't know. I know knowledge, skills, and aptitudes. Or was it attitudes? It's the skills and the things that you need to come in to perform the job well. We're going to talk about the ONet a couple of slides down, but the ONet is an incredibly cool free resource. Here, for example, is a job description. This is, in fact, the one that was used to hire me in the first place at Wesleyan here. So you can see the position begins August 2006. That kind of tells you how long I've been at the school there. But look, the School of Arts and Sciences seeks 2 professors at the assistant or associate level to teach undergraduate experimental courses and applied courses. I was the one that was brought in to teach the much more experimental courses, not the ones to teach the applied courses. Okay? advise undergraduates, conduct research with undergraduates, and participate in curriculum and program development. And so all of a sudden, you see what they're doing is they're describing the different tasks that must be performed in the job. Okay? Careers. Yeah, careers are. I hope that everybody does, in fact, get a career. But there are plenty of people that just sort of meander through life with jobs. And it's a shame. It's a real shame that people have to settle for simply performing jobs instead of fulfilling a career. But in order to choose a career, you need to look at what you have to bring into it, including your academic success and intelligence and stuff, the aptitudes, specific aptitudes and skills that you might have, your personality style, your interests, but also your family and where they come from. We find that careers are important. In many ways, they define who you are. You know, if somebody says to me, who are you? And I'm like, okay, who am I? I'm a husband, I'm a father, okay, so family comes first. But third on that list, I'm a professor. And so all of a sudden, one of the fundamental core things that defines who I am as a person is my career, my occupation, okay? So job characteristics, what do we need to know? Well, it turns out that these things here, many of these things can be found on the ONet that I'm going to describe. The ONet is, where is it? I swear I have it on here somewhere. There it is. So the ONet is an online resource, and this is a link for it, and it's run by the federal government, but it gathers together information about, again, basically a job analysis, right? It describes a job, but it also describes things like where does this job, where does the work get performed? Indoors, outdoors, sitting, standing. It describes, future outlook. It describes salary ranges. It's an amazing tool. And you can go in there and you can search by either K's, S's, or A's. In other words, knowledge, skills, or aptitudes. And so you can put in what skills do you have, and it can kick out what are the most relevant jobs for you. Okay, and it is a very powerfully important a site worth exploring. The Career Center, by the way, the Career Center on campus has free resources, and this is very important because the Career Center is available to students for free, and it's got, of course, access to the ONet, but it's got access to a lot more specialized tools, like the Strong Occupational Interest Inventory, for an example. And so what it does is it goes through and it takes what are your skills, what do you enjoy, things of this nature. And it's not a perfect match, but I remember when I took the Strong Interest Inventory in college, it said I should be an airline pilot. So I didn't go on that route, but it's clearly it is gender biased. Yes, it does tend to send women into more traditionally women jobs. Um, yeah, that I like that second line. That's one I have a very big problem with. Be cautious about choosing a career based on salary alone. It just angers me to no end how many times, how often you can find on the internet these articles that talk about degrees with the lowest return on investment. How much does it cost to get to the degree and how many dollars you'll make across your lifetime. And it just angers me because I'm telling you, you cannot put a value on the satisfaction you receive from finding your calling in life. Many psychology majors, they feel that they've fulfilled their purpose in life by helping others. They don't make shit for money. Their return on investment is pathetic. I'm sorry, psychology majors, but it's true. The amount of money you spend to get your degree compared to how much you're going to return in pure dollars and cents, it's one of the worst majors. Sociology is worse. There are worse majors, but that's not why we're here. I mean, if you took psychology because you thought it'd make you a bunch of money, somebody gave you bad advice, okay? And so the ability to fulfill your life's purpose is, at least in my opinion, absolutely priceless and cannot be put into the economic realm. So be cautious about choosing a career based on money. There will be limits to career options. Yeah, some career decisions are not easily undone. Yeah. Workplace trends. So what's going on in the world today? Obviously, technology. A lot of outsourcing, right? We're seeing the deindustrialization in the United States. As much as Donald Trump used this in 2016 to convince the idiots in Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. This was the industrial heartland of the United States, but industrial jobs are gone. Just because Donald Trump goes in and promises that they're not coming back. But again, I want to step back for a moment to some earlier topic. Remember, these industrial jobs were mostly held by men, steel plants and coal mines and things of this nature. And what happens is now these men are out of work, and since they defined themselves and they defined their role as a man as being the provider in their household, this is the trend that we're getting. It's not coming back, okay? The United States cannot compete in the industrial realm. There's just too much competition. I mean, even China is starting to lose foothold on it because all of a sudden Bangladesh is cheaper. And all of a sudden Bangladesh is losing a foothold because Myanmar is cheaper. And so American companies are just sliding downhill. How low can we go to make the cheapest possible products no matter what's going on? All right. So again, that's another one I have some rants on. So technology is definitely changing the nature of work, and so workers need to have more education. I mean, a high school diploma isn't going to cut it anymore. You just can't. My grandfather dropped out of high school to join World War II. He never finished his high school diploma, but he ended up as chief engineer at a major electronics company just because he was able to, show his abilities and work his way up. Well, you would never get in the front door without it nowadays. So be careful. Lifelong learning. If you're not careful, your industry will get away from you. Um, Yeah, in fact, a friend of mine, he has a PhD in engineering. And what happened was life happened. And he ended up with inheriting, for a lack of a better word, a restaurant. It was a Subway, all right? So all of a sudden it comes in from his parents. He's like, okay, so he goes in and he takes care of this restaurant and he's running it. It's relatively profitable for quite a few years, 10, 15 years. But all of a sudden, out of the blue, the owner of the building that this restaurant is in says, nope, we're not going to give you your lease. You have to shut down. And so all of a sudden he lost his franchise. And so now he's got a PhD in engineering, but he let everything go past him. And he would have to go and get re-educated in order to keep up. And so he can't. So unfortunately, he's just sitting home every single day, literally depressed. So that sucks. Telecommuting. Yeah, that's interesting. Right now, I mean, I'm telecommuting. I'm not going to work at all. I'm doing every single thing from home. I'm doing all of my work here at home. And it's interesting because telecommuting can lead to lower levels of work-family conflict. But you know what else happens? Is everybody in the family assumes the guy that's sitting home working isn't really working, so he should do all the chores. Does that sound? Oh, not saying I'm bitter, just saying it's true. Okay. Boundaries between work and home are blurring. Clearly, cell phones and whatnot are on that. There is an assumption. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm on an interesting contract right now with the school. As soon as a graduation ceremony occurs, I am off the clock until 3 days before the semester begins in August. In theory, June, July, and half of August, I have no obligation to the university at all. But there is a huge expectation that I'm still on the clock, right? And so emails come, I respond, and I mean, it's a never ending. So even though I have these long breaks, it's still always occurring. Okay? Uh, Let's see. Higher education is correlated to higher earnings. Correlated. Remember that. I'll tell you, as a university faculty, as a professor, I have more, oh my gosh, let's see, 12 years of high school, 5-year bachelor's degree, don't ask, 2 years master's degree, 5-year PhD, 2-year postdoc, so that's what, 12, 17, 19, 24, 26. So that's 26 years of education. All right. So I should have $1 billion salary, right? No. But correlated. Okay. So yes, I definitely get a higher income than high school graduates, but so men are typically paid more than women at the same jobs. These numbers have been shrinking in recent years, obviously, but they're still quite blatantly there. And we've talked a little bit about this, and that's because say for example at law firms, okay, men are more likely to make partner than women. Why? Because men are going to perform those behaviors that lead to partnerships. Okay, the behaviors women exhibit are very valuable behaviors, but are not rewarded. So it is a broken system. I will agree with that. So, anyway, underemployment, settling for a job that does not utilize your skills, abilities, and training. Yeah, that happens. In fact, anyway, current employees are looking for academic skills, writing, and critical thinking. There they are under my head. This is a very, very true thing. Um, Even in fact, about 6, 7 years ago, Texas Wesleyan University was going through a reaccreditation process, and so our accrediting agency made a task for us. They told us, okay, we need you to identify something that, a weak point, for lack of a better word. I want you to identify a weak point and then put together a plan to solve that, to strengthen that problem. And so Wesleyan went to employers. They went to people that hired our graduates, and they asked them, okay, so you're working with our graduates now. What is it that they're missing? What do you wish that they had more of? And clearly they came back with these two things, writing and critical thinking. Okay? These are the two things that employers said that they wish that the graduates from our school would have better. And I'm positive you could get the same answer from any university, BTW. I'm not cutting on Wesleyan. So, increasingly diverse workplace, of course. Yes, there's discrimination against gays and lesbians still quite a bit, sure, of course. Um, Glass ceiling, yeah, remember the glass ceiling idea was the idea that for many workers there is this in theory they can go as high as they want, but there's this roof, this place so that they can't get past. And again, that's highly connected to which types of behaviors are rewarded in the workplace. Yeah, cultural differences can cause conflict. I actually was talking to, there's another engineer, believe it or not. I know a lot of engineers. And he's Mexican, right? He's a Mexican national, and he's married to an American woman. And so he comes to America and he's working on a job, and he was, let's just say, more affectionate than might be considered acceptable in an American context. And so clearly he was just acting in his normal way, the way he thinks that he's supposed to behave, and he got in some pretty big trouble with no ill intent at all. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of resentment towards diversity training. I think part of the problem is that most businesses, universities included, they keep pushing diversity and the value of diversity, but they never explain what is the value. They never say why. They just push it on and say, diversity for the sake of diversity. And I was like, wait, I got it. Diversity for the sake of better cohesion, diversity for the sake. I mean, there's got to be a reason for it, but it's being pushed as a goal in and of itself. Diversity just for the sake of diversity, and it can create some resentment, and some of my colleagues definitely definitely feel that. Clearly related to diversity training is the affirmative action issues, which we hear about most heavily at like university admission level, but it absolutely happens at all levels of an industry. Privilege and nepotism. Nepotism is a funky word which basically says doing favors for relatives. So, say, for example, take a look at Donald Trump's family and look at his daughter, his son-in-law, his son, and you see that these kids, they have these all amazingly powerful positions without having earned them. Okay, they were just given them, and that's what nepotism is all about: is to not necessarily hire the most qualified candidate, but the one that you're related to or something like this. So jobs do include stress. I love my job. My job is awesome. I cannot believe that there would be any occupation, any job in the world better than mine, okay? And yet there's still going to be problems, okay? For me, it's the very thing I love the most about my job, students, is also the thing that I get the most stress from. Yeah, I guess you can put children in there too, huh? But anyway, long hours, safety concerns, anxiety about downsizing. There's a lot of different sources of job stress, but lack of privacy in some workplaces where they might have an open office space, and some people argue that an open plan for an office, it increases creativity and collaboration, but it takes away from privacy. And so all of a sudden, that's one of those levels of stress, a chronic stressor. Wow, that's really bright back there. A chronic stressor, which is always prevalent, but also high noise levels, conflicts. So the economy is unpredictable, absolutely. Workplace becoming more diverse, blah 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 blah. All right. So here's a model that helps to sort of explain a little bit. So what sources of stress are there? And so we can look at interpersonal relationships and downsizing, fears, etc., like we just described on the last slide. And then we could say, okay, take a look. These sources of stress lead to what we call organizational stress within the organization. Well, it turns out that some people, we talked about it in topic 3 or whatever, some people have good coping strategies, some do not. So coping strategies comes in between organizational stress and strain. Strain is sort of the outcomes, the things that we have. And so we find stress and strain are mediated, I think would be the technical term, mediated by coping strategies. But we can see some actual effects here. And so again, an IO psychologist might look at these strains and say, how much do these cost our organization? How much would it cost the organization to reduce organizational stress? If the cost to reduce organizational stress is less than what I'm losing from these strains, then I'm going to go for it. But what we're finding, and this is in the news, unfortunately. Hey, where'd you go? Okay. And it's in the news. There was one very recent event that happened. And so what happens is, what is a dangerous employee? White males between 30 and 60. There you go. Somebody that doesn't, an isolated person. And they experience a triggering event, often firing, and they view it as unjust. And so what we find is that we'll exhibit so these employees, although the one that just hit the news recently, everybody that worked with this employee said there was no warning signs, but there usually is. There usually is. And industry would do well to pay attention to them. Another occupational hazard, which is pretty pervasive, is sexual harassment. When employees are subjected to unwanted sexual-oriented, I guess, behavior. So quid pro quo is the old-fashioned sexual harassment, which is like this for quid pro quo is Latin for this for that. So if you perform this favor, then this will be what you will receive. Hostile work environment, however, is let's say, for example, office workers that hang up, Playboy centerfolds or something. So it's not it's not a quid pro quo, this for that or something, but it creates an uncomfortable situation on a long enough basis that it disrupts performance. Um, 42% of women report some form of sexual harassment, whereas 15% of men report it. But clearly, it can create negative psychological effects, physical effects. I mean, anything that a pervasive chronic stressor can create, sexual harassment can create. Displaced workers are those that are unemployed because their job has disappeared. And I'm actually in a position right now that I'm concerned about my wife's position because she teaches over at UT Arlington. She teaches foreign students. And unfortunately, the rate of foreign students, because of Donald Trump effect, is just plunging, plunging, plunging. And so all of a sudden, she's got this skill set, but it may just disappear. That just like industry jobs, co-workers and stuff. So obviously you can apply for unemployment benefits, but that unemployment only lasts 6 months or something. I don't even know what it is. But yeah, lower stay healthy. Okay. A workaholic, on the other hand, work can be addictive. It's almost like if somebody puts their work, remember I had said when I define who I am, I put husband, father, professor. And if somebody put their occupation at the very top, then clearly this workaholic will have issues with work-life balance, okay? Clearly work-family conflict. Here's one of my favorite images that comes out of IO psychology, and this is kind of cool that there is this measure that is used in IO psychology called job satisfaction, and job satisfaction is how satisfied you are. Well, we can talk about everything on the left, and these are the antecedents. These are the things that seem to feed into job satisfaction. And so, say, for example, skill variety. So jobs that tend to require the use of a lot of skills tend to lead to higher satisfaction. Jobs that have, I can't even read these things, low stress tend to have high job satisfaction. So we can look at all of these things on the left and say, all of these things are things that IO psychologists should be aware of because they increase job satisfaction. Now, again, they're not increasing job satisfaction because they care about you, okay? They're increasing job satisfaction because a worker that is satisfied, then take a look on the right columns, okay? They have better task performance. They just produce more products or whatever it is that you want to do. They're absent less often. They're late less often. They don't leave the job. And so all of a sudden you find, and it's like, employees that are dissatisfied or unsatisfied steal staplers, right? I mean, that's just how it works. So this job satisfaction as a framework to tie it all together is really intriguing. But again, I don't want to be too cynical, but job satisfaction, it's not because they care about you being satisfied. And finally, we're going to talk very briefly work-family conflict. And this is very, very true, and especially now with dual-earner households. We're trying, and I'll tell you, I got very lucky because my wife and I were able to balance out our schedules so that I go to work very, very early in the morning. She deals with the children in the morning. She gets them to school. And then I leave work very early, 2 o'clock or something, and then I'm able to pick up the kids, right? So I work from like 6 to 2, and she works from like 9 to 5, right? And so all of a sudden we're able to get all of these things done at the same time. Some employers offer flexible hours. Yeah, flexible hours are a very big benefit for employees. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and we've got 2 topics left, and we need to talk about some psychological disorders and some therapy a little bit.